Well, General, this is another fine mess we've gotten into.
Your sense of humor is improving. We can do this the difficult way or the simple way. The choice is yours.
Welcome back to part 2 of the complete life of Plo Koon. We'll pull from every Legends and Canon source, putting them in chronological order with added context to fully understand one of the greatest Jedi in history. Picking up immediately after the Battle of Geonosis, the opening of the Clone Wars. Their first assignment was to the core world Brentaal IV. This unique world had large ice caps framing a band of rocky terrain. Sha Koon was leading the assault on the headquarters of the Separatist commander, Shogar Tak. The position of this core world was vital, and as he was told that they had already lost a quarter of their forces, Plo explained that losing Brentaal IV could mean the loss of the Perlimian trade route and cut off their access to the Tion cluster, which housed the Separatist capital on Raxus. As Sha Koon describes the battlefront conditions, Plo asks about her condition. She says she is fine, but cut off from Agen Kohler's forces, and Plo tells her to retreat to the safety of a nearby prison complex. When she enters, she finds the prisoners in the middle of a riot, and is nearly killed by a raging Wookiee. A force push knocks him out, and she learns that the memory of his family being slaughtered by Mandalorians caused him to have these violent outbursts. She's also stunned to find Quinlan Vos is locked up too, and he catches her up on the fact that someone was using Republic codes to confuse the invasion force, and that here, even in the core, these people considered the Jedi their enemy. When they discover a sewer system that leads to the palace, Master T tells Plo to feign a retreat and return in 4 hours, while the Jedi on world split up their forces. In the battle within the palace, she would come up against another Cortosis weapon, while one of the clones sacrificed himself to take out the planetary defense cannons and shield generators. Plo's fleet descends through the atmosphere and is able to mop up the remaining enemy forces, while Vos rescued Republic prisoners, and Sha Koon killed their leadership. Once the battle was over, and Master T was out of her bacta tank, Plo met with her to discuss these troubling events. This war may have just started for the galaxy, but the Jedi knew their ideals had been slipping for a while, and Sha Koon could see how this war would warp them all. The Jedi were now imposing leadership on people. It all seemed to be for the right end, but this way of thinking was dangerously close to the ideals of a benevolent tyrant, who would come in and kill all who opposed their vision. To make it worse, the chaos of war was robbing the Jedi of the time that would be dedicated to meditating in the Force to find answers. Plo agrees and tells her it is right to question Sha Koon, even if there are no answers. Come, let us meditate together tomorrow. We can be generals and fight this war again. For now, we are simply Jedi, and old friends. Shortly after this, Plo and Adi would take their starfighter squadrons to respond to an SOS from Senator Organa, still in a standard consular, not the modified Chargers. It was being overwhelmed not by separatists, but pirates hoping that the Republic was spread too thin to defend him. With the help of their hyperdrive rings, the Delta 7s and V-19 Torrents are able to outmaneuver and obliterate the enemy ships, staying alongside them to ensure a safe passage to Coruscant. And to Sha Koon's point about them having no time for the Force, it was just hours later that he and Gallia would be off to help Mundi, Skywalker, and Kenobi. It seemed that Kenobi had been killed on world, but Anakin felt that he was still alive. He wanted to see if Plo or Adi could sense him, and when even the highly telepathic Kel Dor could not, he reminds the boy to trust his feelings, that a bond between Master and Padawan were the strongest of all. Adi agrees, and she and Koon would clear out the enemy fighters while the Padawan made it planetside to help Kenobi. From here it was off to Rendili to help an old friend. Jace Dallin had been a young man during the defense of Mount Avos during the Stark Hyperspace War. Seeing Plo's calm and brilliant leadership during what should have been their total defeat would forever inspire him during his rise to become the Rendili fleet commander. Rendili Star Drives was like Kuat Drive Yards, an ancient and powerful shipwright, with their planetary defense fleet of dreadnoughts being one of the most powerful navies in the galaxy. The people had decided that their interests were aligned with the Separatists, but were still friendly with Republic officials, including many Jedi. Master Koon and Jan Dodonna would meet with Jace to try and convince him to defect. Palpatine suggested a blitzkrieg attack for their betrayal, hoping to wipe out their planetary fleets at once, and send a message to the other member worlds under Rendili's sphere of influence. Though the Jedi sought a peaceful resolution, they knew that if these dreadnoughts turned on the Republic fleets, it would mean death for tens of thousands of clones. Despite the tension everyone else was feeling, Plo greeted his old ally warmly, a hand on the man's shoulder as he assured Jace that he knew the right move was to keep the Republic intact, that this was what all his friends died for during the Stark War. Jace knew that the official story from his own government was that they willingly joined Dooku, but when confronted by Lieutenant Yago, he reveals his suspicion that their leaders had been bought off. that the puppet government was going to drag its citizens into war. In just seconds, the man pulls a blaster on his superior and orders that they are placing him under arrest on the authority of the independent provisional government of Rendili, accusing him of being a traitor. With a knife to his throat and a blaster against his head, Jace tells Plo to just let him die and kill the lieutenant, but the Jedi deactivates his blade and tells Jan Dodonna they must surrender as long as preserving life was still an option. Yago explains to his men that they will use the prisoners to buy time, and brags to Plo that soon Dooku will be sending reinforcements that would trap the Republic fleet. Plo assures him that although Master Tin will have a heavy heart, he will give the orders to destroy the dreadnoughts even with them on board. Looking to call his bluff, he opens a channel with the acclimators and screams that he will rip off Plo's mask and let him drown in the oxygen before their eyes if they do not leave. The stoic Kel Dor explains, with blaster to his neck, that the man was at a disadvantage because he feared death, while the Jedi did not. Tin gives very clear instructions, unwavered by the threat. They have 1 hour to stand down, before turbolaser bolts and missiles start flying. If they kill any hostages before that, the might of the Republic would descend on them immediately. Saesee Tin was arguably the best pilot in the galaxy for decades, but was realizing that young Skywalker was quickly taking the mantle. Together they worked on modifying the Azure Angel, a ridiculously fast and maneuverable Delta 7. And Anakin said he was confident that by going solo, he could evade the Dreadnought's defenses and disable their navicomputer, ensuring they could not jump to hyperspace. But to further complicate things, Kenobi had arrived with Voss, the renegade who was reeking of arrogance and the stench of the dark side. Kenobi claimed he was here to turn himself into the Council, and Tin was fuming that this drama was playing out in the middle of the battle. He ordered him to hand over his saber and be locked up and await transport to Coruscant for review by the High Council. By now, the hour was up, but separatist core ships appeared to back up the Rendili fleet. Tin ordered all fighters to launch. The battle was intense, with acclimators losing their power, and a third of their starfighters were scrapped. And with the energy grid in the prison wing down, Voss was free to grab his saber and blaster. Anakin was moving to disable the enemy flagship, while Captain Yago was preparing for a high-risk linked hyperspace jump. Myths abounded about the fate of the Katana fleet that went missing in Chiss space after they supposedly went mad from the unique hyperspace effects on the mind coming from this dangerous linked jump. Meanwhile, Plo Koon was deep in meditation, plainly revealing to his cellmates that rescue was imminent. Voss had proved his loyalty, stealing a ship not to escape, but join up with Kenobi in his rescue mission. Together, the Jedi, Jace, and Dodonna were able to free the other Republic loyalists, and even Yago's second-in-command folded as Plo slashed his way toward him, blasting the mutineers and declaring everyone lay down their arms and obey the Jedi. Jace would move toward the bridge and end up killing Yago, and immediately contacting General Tin to announce the dreadnoughts would be turning their fire on the core ships. And together, this joint fleet made quick work of the CIS forces, clearing all of Rendili space. Plo and Jace happy to have made it through another treacherous mission. It wasn't long before Mace was holding another mission briefing, explaining that with the loss of Nexus Ortai, nearly 24 worlds were lost in the Outer Rim, and they would need to strike at the major shipyards of the CIS. When Mace says the banking clan's factory should be hit next, Palpatine speaks up to say that the Senate would never allow this. The IGBC was neutral, providing loans and products to both sides of the war. They should not force them to cut off the Republic. Kenobi counters this by saying they could hit only the factories producing ships for the CIS and compensate them for their loss. The insanity that these credits would be paid back by the credits loaned out from the central banking clan in the first place, but it seemed like the only plausible short-term solution for this immediate threat. Plo pulls up the Gori system and says that while a full-scale attack was off the table, a small force could act as saboteurs. He goes on to say the main problem was the increased security. This was the first droid-only zone that they had encountered. Details were scarce. All they knew is that ships entering this orbit were irradiated, killing any organics on board while doing no damage to the droids. All were confused how Anakin planned on getting through the irradiators, but he revealed a unique solution, saying he heard of bounty hunters on Tatooine that would transport their catch safely and off of scanners by freezing them in carbonite. He says that the radiation in any scanners would be scrambled by the carbonite shell, and he assures Rex that they won't be in long enough to get hibernation sickness. This plan did work, getting them through the port while R2 commanded their captured B-1 droids. It wasn't long before they captured the Mune shipyard, and using this they were able to get in touch with Plo in orbit, telling them that the bombers will launch the following afternoon, and he goes to brief his hunter squadron. His pilots picked up on the general's practice of joking in the face of death, and when they hear the mission was designated a no-returner, a pilot tells Warthog that if they make it back, he owes him drinks for the next 10 rotations. Plo explains that their target is the Equatorial Canyon, and that they will need to expect automated defenses and to seek and destroy at will once in position, as the exact coordinates were still hard to pin down. Tin explains that they will be using proton bombs for maximum damage, but this means they will have to escape their own blast zone quickly. He continues that they will have to get past the blockade by performing an experimental new tactic, a precision hyperspace jump that pops them out in between the capital ship and the planet. The pilots knew it hadn't been done before, but Plo assured them that there was only a moderate risk of collision or being spaghettified by the gravity fluctuations. On world, the Jedi had been betrayed by the slaves they freed. The propaganda and sheer terror instilled in them led one to alert their overlord. The Mun laughed once the Jedi had been captured, admitting that the Jedi really were there to save them, to get them out of the blast radius before they bombed the facility, and that the only reason the CIS used organic slaves was to act as living shields around high-priority targets. Hours later, the experimental tactic worked, and the squadrons were dipping into the atmosphere, pilots all joking with each other, and Plo had to make sure that their minds were focused on the run. In the Mun's palace, he gets an alert that bombers were making their approach, and he notices that the slaves were gone. His own female servant had faked an attraction to lower his defenses, and was able to help return the Jedi's blades as they helped move the slaves to a transport. It turned out that the Mun calling them all idiots only helped to motivate a slave revolt and free the Jedi. Tin and Koon led the bomber squadrons, taking out their anti-air defenses, allowing the Y-Wings to deliver their payload. Plo points out that they are only hitting the top hangar, that most of them aren't even being damaged. Tin says they can still call us a victory and to peel off, but Plo thinks outside the box, telling the fighters to switch their target to the support. Just as the Munificent full of slaves and Jedi saviors was peeling off, the proton bombs found their mark and the target was completely destroyed. As the shipyard was collapsing, they raced back up to orbit to destroy the radiation beam gate, scrapping it just seconds before it delivered these thousands of slaves a horribly painful death. With the Mun slaver in hysterics, the Delta 7s would take refuge in the Munificent's hangar, and the Republic strike team escaped through hyperspace. Once the debriefs were over, the Jedi could catch their breath, and excited Anakin asked about the details of the experimental hyperspace tactic. Though Tin said he wouldn't recommend it, Skywalker couldn't wait to try it. Then it was off to Cormendi to capture a crucial trading outpost where Amir Wat Tambor was personally controlling Separatist forces. Before they launch, Plo checks in with his commander to make sure he understands this mission would depend on the Wolfpack. Wolf was confident and all smiles, and moments later they were making their descent through the clouds of droid starfighters, Plo leading from his custom Delta 7 named the Blade of Doran, a gift from the mechanical genius Anakin Skywalker, similar to the Azure Angel built by Anakin and Saesee Tiin. He reminded the ARC-170s that they needed to keep the vultures buzzing around them and keep their attention from the LA-ATs. The trade port turned fortress was impervious to large craft, but by approaching via jetpack, this smaller, nimble force was able to outmaneuver the anti-aircraft guns, and though the D-Wing droids did give them some trouble, they do make it to the command center, and Wolf is stopped in his tracks by Tambor and his hostage. He ignores the clones' pleas and sets the entire station to blow, being whisked off by his droids while the clones struggle to gain their balance and save the woman. As they race back to the gunship, they see their general was waiting for them with an open hand, and the first thing he asks is if all his men were okay. Wolf is quick to apologize for failing the mission. He knew how important it was to secure the Nexus and capture Tambor, but Plo brushes this all off as inconsequential, saying that he sees the entire unit was safe, they saved a hostage, that they both trusted each other to do their parts and survive this mission, but that in war you couldn't hope for much more than this. Wolf would think back to this during the Republic's siege of Hissenna. They joined forces with the 212th and 501st in a mission that could see the capture of Dooku and Ventress. The Jedi were facing the Sith while the clones protected the citizens, and during the battle, Plo was desperately trying to contact Wolf to tell him to change the mission and move on to protect the Parliament, but the transmission was too broken up to understand. Boost tells Wolf that he received coordinates, and he reasons that the Jedi must want them to move to this new location. However, Cody says that they should not change the plan without direct orders. They can't just speculate in the middle of the battle. Rex tells him not to worry, that the Blue Boys could hold down this position, and Cody leaves the final decision to Wolf. Knowing that Plo did trust them, he moves through the coordinates and finds a droid force taking the Parliament hostage. And also knowing the enemy was willing to kill innocent civilians, they were quick to drop a few droid poppers, freeing everyone just in time to respond to Rex's call for backup. Waves of clankers surrounded them, and they were all about to be executed when the Jedi came to the rescue, droids sliced in half by sabers for the end of another successful mission. Later this year, still in 22 BBY, Plo would be in command of a trio of Venators patrolling the core, searching for a mysterious new CIS superweapon that had destroyed dozens of capital ships, leaving no witnesses. It would be near the Red Giant of Abrogado that he first laid his silver eyes on the subjugator class named the Malevolence.
I think it wise to report our position before we attack.
Skywalker was nearby, but for once, the young man was saying he needed to obey his orders and stay put. Before Plo could explain further, the Separatists are able to jam communications. Plo gives the order to fire, but they were out of range, and in a split second, the massive ion pulse from the prototype rushes towards them. Plo yelling the order to get everyone to the escape pods, as their entire fleet is consumed. With shields down, the enemy turbo lasers opened up, and the Venators returned into massive chunks of debris, compounding the damage further.
That his fleet was destroyed like the others. We are about to prepare a rescue mission.
The Council and Supreme Chancellor give orders to stay on defense out of fear of losing more Venators, while Ahsoka pleads they must go save her old friend and mentor. Anakin sharply rebukes her and says they need to respect protocol, but then shows her how it's done, taking his own ship, the Twilight, to go search Plo's last known location. Master Koon would have likely played a role in making Ahsoka the Padawan of Skywalker, being on the Council when that decision was made. And these two didn't realize it yet, but they were the latest great example of how the Council made pairs that showed the weaknesses of each other's dominant traits. Plo learned to respect the informal style of his master, Tyvaka, while Plo helped Tyvaka calm down. Young Kenobi was actually quite rebellious and learned to respect protocol out of response to the extremely loose and spontaneous style of Qui-Gon. And Skywalker would see just how dangerous and problematic it was to always want to jump into the next battle and do whatever you thought was right. As much as Plo was a mentor to little Ahsoka, they all knew they were too dissimilar, but Tano and Skywalker would realize how hypocritical they were, taking turns being reckless and then being annoyed when the other one was being disobedient. Only that would teach both the wisdom of having some sort of structure and hierarchy of command. Luckily for Plo, this pairing also worked to teach Ahsoka how to do good without being directly disobedient, leaving the Venators on defense just as the superiors ordered, and taking on this personal craft to search for Plo, because even his own men thought the right move was to leave them for dead.
Strategically, it doesn't make any sense for someone to come look for us. If I was in command, I'd be hunting that weapon down.
I value your life more than finding that weapon.
As they float, they see that the pods had been broken up. Something had killed all the troopers inside, and the Master knows that they are not alone. Then they pick up on the frantic calls for help from another pod, confirming a droid search and destroy team was diligently going about racking up more war crimes. Anakin was now searching through the debris, and having only been her master for a few days at this point, he asks why she has such strong feelings for Plo.
He's one of my oldest friends. It was Master Plo Koon who found me and brought me to the temple where I belonged. Now he's lost, so I thought maybe I could find him.
A Droch-class boarding ship locked onto them, and as it approached, Plo was calm and motivating.
This is a difficult situation, but there remains a possibility we will survive.
A firefight erupted as the troopers and their general moved out to engage the jetpack-equipped B-1s, as the Droch started crushing the pod, releasing their air supply into the void of space. Koon used the Force to send out his wolves to flank the droids, while he was able to slice their pod free. This bought them some time, but as the Droch exploded, Grievous knew they must have run into some survivors. While Plo was ever stoic, he and his men clung to the pierced pod, and their cynicism showed itself again.
Sergeant, why are you so certain no one is coming?
We're just clones, sir. We're meant to be expendable.
Not to me.
Plo detected little Ahsoka in the Force, and used his great telepathic powers to guide her. Once they are safely brought into the Bay of the Twilight, his first thought is to ask about the others.
Tell me, were there any survivors?
We couldn't find anybody else.
This moment of peace was short-lived, as they spot the Malevolence coming right towards them. Plo snaps into action, shutting down all the ship systems to evade their scanners. Then they hear R2, but with the push of a button, they think they had safely removed their electrical signature. But in the prototype superweapon, a technician noticed the faint presence of a single droid on the scanners. The enemy moves to intercept, just as the med droid steps into the cockpit. They all know they had been detected, and Skywalker races through the debris to avoid the plasma eye of death that was closing on them. With only a second to spare, they do make the jump through hyperspace. They rejoin Anakin's fleet and quickly plan a counterstrike.
We'll concentrate our firepower on the bridge superstructure.
But Plo is concerned.
Minimal casualties may be enough to prevent you from breaking Grievous's defenses.
Master Plo is right.
Koon knows that with the top general of the entire Separatist military, the bridge would be one of the most heavily defended targets the Republic had faced at this point. And Plo muses with Ahsoka on how Skywalker's ability to inspire confidence stemmed from his history of leading the charge into blaster fire, while the Malevolence was busy destroying more Republic ships, from Venators to Pelta-class medical transports. Plo and Admiral Yularen get word of this as Anakin was prepping the Y-Wing squadrons, and they all agree that the next CIS target will be a major medical station near Naboo. In order to intercept them, they would have to take a dangerous shortcut through the Kaleida Nebula.
Any help is welcome, Master Plo. Just try not to fall behind.
I had a feeling you'd be coming along. Your ship has already been prepped.
All knew that Plo was up there with the best pilots in the Order, just under Saesee Tiin and Skywalker himself. The Kaminoan in charge of this facility is warned by Kenobi, and she is told that aid is being sent from Naboo as well. When they arrive at the nebula, Plo reminds everyone just how dangerous this would be, knowing that these clones would be purely relying on Skywalker's own secret path. And when they enter, he supports Anakin's advice to the Padawan.
Skywalker is right, Ahsoka. Clear your mind, young one, and you will see the path.
When she asks more questions about how he knows about this path, Anakin says he heard about it from smugglers, and hearing this was the Balmoral Run, Plo is uncharacteristically panicked.
Balmoral Run?
I think I'm picking up a contact.
Skywalker, listen to me. We need to turn around.
On cue, an enormous group of Nibre Mantis swarm over them. Plo knows that now their only course is to calmly weave through them. One of the bombers was hit, suffering some minor damage to its engine, prompting the Master to remind them of how narrow their margin of success was.
If we lose even a single ship, our mission is that much closer to failure.
With 500 turbolasers and dozens of Ultra Droid squadrons, Grievous laughs at the blips on his radar, expecting this to be an easy victory. But as the pilots blast their way closer, he gives the order to fire the super weapon. The ion pulse closes the gap so fast that many of his own droid starfighters were hit, and the damaged Y-Wing's engines explode trying to push past the disc, causing the ship to crash into his brothers, killing the crew instantly and costing them these 2 bombers, while another 3 Y-Wings were disabled by the ion pulse. The Subjugator class had few point defense systems, but the flak from the sheer volume of turbolaser fire drops even more bombers, and Ahsoka pleads with her master to see that while he may be able to cut through this, the clones could not. And without stepping on the young man's command, Plo doesn't pull his rank and try to order Anakin to change the plan, but does suggest they change their target from the bridge to the weapon itself. As it was charging up to fire on the medical station, the Y-Wings whipped around and delivered the payload just as it was set to fire. The explosion and chain reaction worked to cripple the entire behemoth, just as Kenobi's fleet popped out of hyperspace. With the Malevolence in flames and limping away, the Venators were the ones opening fire this time, while Plo made sure to congratulate Anakin, knowing this human was eager to push on and kill the CIS leader.
Great job, Master Skywalker. Your leadership skills are most impressive.
With an engine array the size of the Republic's greatest capital ship, they keep firing into the beast, waiting for a catastrophic failure.
But the ship is so massive it can take all the fire our cannons can give it.
We must summon reinforcements.
Grievous frantically begs Count Dooku for aid, but he tells him that Padme Amidala is en route, having been given coordinates by Chancellor Palpatine, supposedly from a banking clan elite hoping to meet up for talks of leaving the CIS. But as her ship exits hyperspace, the tractor beams effortlessly pull in the tiny Naboo craft. Ahsoka notices this, and when they went to hail the mystery ship, Anakin is horrified at the sight of her being brought on board. He orders Yularen to cease fire, and though Masters Kenobi and Koon know how important this target is, they do not protest. Ahsoka would stay with Plo as Annie and Obi moved to extract the Senator, but the mission would take longer than expected. Plo worried that they would have to choose to destroy the Malevolence, now losing 2 great generals and friends along with Padme. But just then, they spot the Twilight racing towards them. He orders the turbolasers to open fire, and as the droid crew moved to use the now repaired hyperdrive, Grievous realized that choosing to hop in his personal craft Solus 1 and pursue these Jedi saved his life, as the hacked Navicomputer sent the Malevolence on a crash course for a nearby moon. And shortly after this, Plo would help finish the fight against these prototype superweapons on a mission paired with Little Ahsoka, but which also included Kenobi, Skywalker, Windu, and Fisto. They would locate and infiltrate the sister ship of the Malevolence, the other subjugator class named the Devastation, which had a laser powered by Force crystals, one of the first iterations of the idea that would eventually lead to the Death Star. It too had the ability to destroy a planet, not blow it to dust like its descendant, but enough to rip up the crust and burn away all life on world. A Night Sister named Sai Sirku would betray the new Separatist allies and use the mysterious powers of the I-Corps to take command of this weapon. She wanted to use this weapon on Coruscant and bring an end to the Jedi and Republic in one fell swoop, but this elite strike team comprised of a majority of the Jedi Council was able to set off a chain reaction to put an end to the separatist superweapon programs. It wasn't long before he and Kenobi respond to a distress call from Windu and Fisto on Juma 9, a crucial Republic station. Cody's men blast their way through the clankers in the corridors, and the Jedi make their way to their leader, Tal Kesca, a Sha Koon in a combat mech suit. Kenobi is eager to cut him down, and even doubts that the detonator he brought out was real. This is the second self-destruct threatening Sha Koon he'd come across, and Plo had to be the one to calm Kenobi down.
Steady, Obi-Wan. I do not sense any deception.
The battle was intense, but eventually they were able to send him flying out of the transparasteel window. But the vacuum effect sucking them out also brought the detonator near the Sha Koon's grasp, prompting Kenobi to throw his blade at it, and Plo sent his blade towards the emergency shutdown. But when the panels rapidly closed, their sabers were trapped out in space. The Force made sure these blades were picked up by Cody's forces en route, but another emergency energy shield would cut them off from the clones. Instead of waiting, the two masters used the Force as their only weapon, Plo fighting like the Barando sages back home, and he had to borrow from the B1s to break their friends free.
General Kenobi, Master Plo. That was an entrance worthy of young Skywalker.
After the space station was secured, and the Masters returned to Coruscant for debrief and some recovery, Plo and Fisto would again work together, along with Master Tot, this time combining the troopers under their command and heading out to Khorm in the Mid-Rim. This ice-covered world was one of 3 in the galaxy that produced an ore called Agrosite. Like coaxium, it was able to power ships at a much greater ratio than standard fuel sources, and could even be used to supercharge weapon systems. Plo stands atop the Command ATTE Walker, peering past the snow, looking for the native allies he had contacted previously, while Fisto is trying to get Captain Ozzel to chill out. The non-clone human was of the Republic Judicial Forces before the war, and was not fitting into this clone and Jedi system. Fisto tells him nobody rushes Master Plo Koon. As he exits with Commander Wolf, the trooper asks about Plo's past, saying the boys all had a bet on how old he was. Kit said that Plo was like this long before he even came to the Jedi Temple, and the more he thinks about how Plo has the energy of youth with the demeanor of an ancient sage, he admits now he was curious too, and Plo calls back to cut them off, saying his age is irrelevant to the mission, before hopping down to greet the Khormai leader, Commander Adaru. The walrus-like biped explains that one of their own people had joined forces with Dooku, enslaving his own kind to work the Agrosite mines. As Kit gets philosophical, the Khormai plainly calls out that the Republic is only here for the ore, but the Jedi gives a predictable answer that what was on the planet belonged to the natives. Letting time be the judge, he leads the way down the treacherous mountain path towards the target. J1 proton cannons open fire not on the armored transports, but the walls of ice that surround them, and as the Jedi scramble for cover, they see that the clone troopers are running out of the armored units. Master Tot calls out the Republic captain's idiotic order, and Plo rushes forward with the Jedi flanking out to his side, sabers slashing trying to deflect the incoming bolts, teasing Kit to keep up being the young one. As one who trained frequently in the chaos meditations of the Barando sages, he is able to give orders in all this fire with his conventional calm, ordering Tot to take the cannons, but Kit and Plo were surrounded by battle droids. Captain Ozzel says they were in position, and to open fire, that the Jedi would know how to take cover. Kit, Tot, and the native commander duck for cover as the laser fire rains down all around them, with Plo being the only one to stand tall, seeing through the Force that he would be fine. They had taken the plant, but the warlord escaped via railjet. They quickly set up a perimeter and use this as their command post. Warming up and reviewing their options, the Jedi agree that with the railjet gone, and the storm too intense to use air support, they would have to launch a frontal assault right into the waiting guns of the entrenched droid forces. And Ozzel reminds Wolf that the clone's purpose is to obey orders, and die if necessary. The Jedi code to protect life was irrelevant on the battlefront, but Plo wasn't having it. He stepped to him and pointed out how reckless the captain was in taking the space, and that he was aware that Ozzel only got this rank because of his personal friendship with Palpatine, that no matter how connected he was, on the battlefront, this captain would obey the orders of the Jedi generals, his superiors, eliciting a meek, "Yes, sir." Meanwhile, in orbit, a single Seppi ship breaks through the blockade, and the V-19s that try to shoot it down are ripped to shreds by the intense storm. They are able to get a message through to Plo warning him of reinforcements, and point out that the storm is focused around their objective, seeming to confirm reports that the CIS was interested in weather control tech. Plo says he and Kit would move to destroy this device, allowing them to use their air support for the main attack, and is sure to cut off complaints from the captain, and order Tot to stay with Commander Wolf in order to hold down the fort. while he took the Devil Dogs. The elite clones of the 44th Special Operations Division shared their proud history as they raced over the frozen canyons, debating the morality of war, as in their eyes whatever brought about the fastest victory was key to saving lives, not worrying about the individuals of a particular mission. At their forward base, AATs were descending on them, with the heavy fire stunning the captain, forcing Wolf to shuffle him to safety as Taunt rushed back to the comm station. That mysterious ship that slipped through had delivered Dooku's assassin, and she detonated a charge that nearly killed the Jedi. But when he survived, and even seemed to get the advantage, beating the Night Sister and sending one of her blades flying, she showed her skills in the Force, calling it back to impale him, the Jedi falling into her arms, dying to her taunting words. Ozzel realizes he is in command now, and orders all their forces to charge at a seeming weakness in their line, despite Wolf's sharp protest. Once the walkers were far enough from the base, Ventress sprung the trap. Dozens of spider droids erupted from the snowbanks and opened fire, killing nearly everyone in a matter of seconds. Ozzel frantically tells Wolf to signal a surrender, but he explained they don't take prisoners, face dropping as he realizes even the captain, a friend of Palpatine, would be slaughtered without a second thought on this remote hunk of ice. As Wolf tried to evade fire and make it back, Plo's forces were making their way up the mountain toward the weather device. They find a Khorm village that was massacred by the droids, and Plo instantly goes to carving out graves for them as Commander Adaru moves the bodies. Sharp, the Devil Dog leader, was annoyed by this pointless gesture, but Kit argued that it was acts like this that truly kept the Republic alive, if the Republic was to mean anything at all. And as they finish the burials, Plo defends the clones' reaction, telling Kit to remember they did not have the training of a Jedi. As Kit wonders if this coldness from the troops, and even the natives towards their own people, would become more common as the war dragged on, Plo admits that he had never seen the galaxy in such a brutal state, joking not even in his many years. Nonetheless, it was up to them to be the light in the ever-growing darkness. As Sharp butts in, adding that the droids' lack of ethics had already been the deciding factor in many CIS victories. Plo does get the man to see that turning into the enemy was far worse than merely letting a point on a holo map change color. To lose their way was to lose the ultimate objective. But though Sharp appeared to be moved, telling his men to help with the burials, this was just to shorten the delay. Back at the base, Ventress is lopping off clone heads to get the captain to give up Plo and Kit's location. The man pleads with her to respect the convention of civilized systems, but she just presses her saber to Ozzel's neck. The heat burning his skin makes it easy to ignore Wolf's attempt at instilling some honor, telling him not to give up their brothers, but the man squeals out that they were on their way to the Climate Control Center. Her arm swings back as she says the reward will be a quick death, only for Warlord Gout to stop her by saying they can be used as slaves, or at the very least as food for slaves. The team at the station was alerted that a strike force is en route, and Plo can sense the thoughts racing through the enemy, so he opts to ditch the speeders and climb the last leg of the path, a route they would not expect. But they'd still be a half-day hike to get there, and it seemed like they were intensifying the storm around the station, providing the perfect cover for Ventress's ambush. Plo tells her she stands no chance against two masters, but she uses the Force to cause an avalanche that consumes everyone but her. In their temporary holding cell, Wolf and the boys are working to hotwire the security gate controls, while calling out Ozzel for being a coward. He screams that he is still their superior, but Wolf ignores him and leads the breakout. Back on the mountain, the strike team pops out of the snow and scrap the nearest droids. Plo explaining to the troops that they used a Force bubble to save them, but he had broken his left arm in the process, keeping the jokes going by blaming it on the passing of ages. Sharp says they lost 4 of their men, but is most upset that they lost the explosives, and says that the Jedi should have just stayed on offense and destroyed the enemy instead of focusing on protecting them. While they debate if a clone is a weapon or a person, Kit jumps in to say that the Jedi's philosophical side, and their want to save people from death, will be what makes a difference in how this war ends. A prophetic statement, even if not in the way he hoped. Adaru puts an end to the talk with a call from his horn. Enormous woolly worms called Alids burst up, and the native explains that they can use these as transports, not riding on them, but inside of their mouths. As they try to cross the last miles, Wolf's team was using an AAT to break free of the compound. Moments later, their beast delivered them just outside of the Weather Control Center, and Plo explains that since they did not have the explosives, they would have to take control and turn the Hurricane Force winds against itself. Sharp realizes that there was no plan to escape, and was surprised and impressed that the Jedi were truly not operating out of fear. He saw the Jedi were able to be compassionate, while Plo was calmly explaining that they would all die on this mission. Meanwhile, the clones were trying to explain to Ozzel that they couldn't follow the captain's orders to flee this world and abandon the strike team, no matter how much he screamed at them, since all of their ships and vehicles had been frozen solid or destroyed. Blaster bolts crack through the cold air and cut down several troopers, and Wolf moves to protect the captain. At the same time, Plo's forces were taking fire as they sliced into the antenna feed, and he gives the order to bring it down on them. The Aqualish tech panics, but there is nothing they could do. In just seconds, a tornado spirals towards them, shredding the facility and raining down chunks of debris. The strike team desperately search for cover, as the Admiral in atmosphere doesn't miss a beat, giving the order to rush in at the first sign of the storm breaking up. As Ventress was slicing her way towards the clones, gunships and fighters destroy the entire tank column, as the assassin tells the few remaining forces to fall back. Light finally shines on the battlefront, and Wolf cannot believe how ungrateful and shameless Ozzel is. He was praising himself, as the commander tried his best to stay calm and just contact his general. Plo reminds him that the mission is not finished. They must move to the Separatist base and repository for the Agrosite. Once they reach a lookout point, Plo warns that he senses the enemy still has some secret weapon at their disposal, and Kit notices that they are moving explosives into the mine. They realize that they will blow up the entire facility before letting it fall, killing all the Khorm inside. Knowing that they needed to strike with speed and violence, he defers command to Sharp, saying they would do it his way, and wanted to warn Ozzel not to strike until the hostages were free. But their long-range comms were being blocked. Wolf and the clones know that their victory was not as easy as it seemed, that Ventress was planning something, but they obey their orders and charge into the facility. As Plo's team climbs towards the mine, he reminds the Devil Dogs that this is a mission of compassion, not destruction. In his wisdom, the Jedi wanted Sharp to feel what it was like to save people. Letting him take charge would help the clone identify himself with this compassionate act. They needed to hurry because minutes later, the roar of Republic craft was echoing through the mountain range, and laser cannon fire rolled over the outer defenses. Then massive, purple beams of Agrosite-powered cannons opened fire on the acclimators overhead, taking out the assault ships with a single hit. Ozzel again is about to lay bantha tracks in his pants, shouting to bomb the cannons, but Wolf simply says that the target is too hardened. So now what are the orders? The arrogant friend of Palpatine is speechless, and more acclimators are turned into fireballs. Plo sees that he must adapt the plan, and does allow Sharp to be on the demo team, sending him with Kit to go into the cannons, while he led the rest down into the mines. As he and Ataru run through the shadowed corridors, he picks up on the dark side just a split second before crimson sabers slash towards his head. They crash against his blue blade, and he orders the team to continue on as he held the assassin back. She notices his broken arm and taunts the Master, before using her martial arts to deliver powerful kicks. He absorbs many before flinging her back with a force push while rebuking her cynical philosophy. Kit Fisto was using a force-assisted jump to get into the barrel of the Agrosite cannon, pulling up Sharp with him, and went to work slicing through the droid crew. This worked to draw away the droids guarding the slaves, while the rest of the Devil Dogs were helping to free the natives. Their leader was making sure these capital ship-killing guns were taken out. Kit had moved the Agrosite charge near the other cannons, and before he knew what the clone was doing, Sharp was on top of it and told the general to run, that he was going out like a devil dog, using his blaster as a firing pin to cause a chain reaction that blew off the top of the mountain, completely eliminating this threat and taking the warlord down with him, while Kit leapt to safety, landing near the mine entrance. With one arm and an improvised sleeve, Master Plo was still able to send one of Ventress's blades flying, but in her fury, she beats him back and thinks she has him pinned, bragging that with the press of a button, she will kill all the Khormai and deny the Republic their precious ore. He showed he was not exhausted and weak. With a wave of his hand, the detonator fell to the level below, and a bolt strikes it just before she can pick it back up. This time it was Wolf doing the taunting, and Fisto closes in on her, demanding she give up. Her eyes widen with madness, and in an instant she flashes past Wolf, slashing him as she made her escape. The blow shattered his helmet into pieces, the blade vaporizing through skin, bone, and eye. Plo rushes to his friend's side as the clone dropped to his knees in pain. Later that evening, Plo explains to Fisto that he knows they could have tried to pursue Ventress, but that taking care of the wounded in this battle was more important. And they attend the holo call with the Supreme Chancellor, who is thanking Captain Ozzel for his heroic leadership under heavy enemy fire, that he will be rewarded with a flagship and fighter group, while everyone did their best to hide their disgust. Plo, Kit, and Wolf then go to say their goodbyes to Ataru, and to settle the question raised before this whole mission went sideways. How old is Plo Koon? The Master says if he must know, he is 382 years old in Kel Dor years, begging the question how that relates to the galactic standard, but Plo walks off saying they will have time to figure that out. Kit laughing at how much of a prankster the old stoic was, because according to every biologist across Coruscant, the average Kel Dor lifespan is only around 70 standard years. And from this frozen battlefront, Plo is quickly off to Felucia.
Warthog, protect the gunships. I will take out the fighters.
They would provide the air support for Kenobi and Anakin's forces working through the thick jungles in ATTEs and Juggernauts.
Come around and I'll try to get them off your tail.
Little Ahsoka was exhibiting the worst case yet of her disregard for orders, to the point of why these two were paired. Anakin could see what it looked like when one acted from only their limited point of view.
They're about to overrun you, Ahsoka. You just can't see it. Now follow orders and get in the ship.
After they successfully make it back to Coruscant, Plo would be there in person to decide her punishment for disobeying direct orders. Later we see Plo appearing on a hologram to view the message sent directly by General Grievous.
I do not care about your republic. I only live to see you die.
And while the Jedi were recoiling from this blow, Wolf steps into view, and though he was down an eye, with the scar from Ventress's blade still fresh on his face, he sees something everyone else missed.
Commander Wolf has found a message in the holotransmission. Play back the message.
Without this clue, Koth would have surely suffered a long and painful death, but a strike team led by Gallia, Kenobi, and Skywalker were able to bring the Master home. Later this year, the young Boba Fett would launch his plan to get revenge on Mace Windu for killing his father. At just 11 years old, he worked with his dad's old allies, Bossk and Aurra Sing, to sneak into the Jedi's Venator, bomb Windu's quarters, and when this didn't work, take down the entire ship. To make sure he got his revenge, he hoped a trap placed in the wreckage would do the trick. Though searching through the wreckage proved too dangerous to confirm the kill, he thought he tracked Windu escaping, but it was R2 who was desperately trying to make it back to Coruscant, evading Fett's Slave 1. Moments later would tumble into Plo's mission briefing.
This should prevent cleavage from... R2, deliver the message you so obviously need to communicate.
Ahsoka helps R2 share her master's recording, and Plo doesn't waste a second.
Prepare my ship. We shall leave immediately.
Fuel and weapon systems were catching fire and exploding the downed Venator, and they were only a few minutes from death when the Wolfpack flew into position via LAATs. Wolf and the boys would cable over and rescue the Jedi, while the entire bridge was being held up through Plo and Ahsoka's power. While Masters Windu and Skywalker were recovering, Plo visits them and has to share some bad news.
They apparently took hostages.
Mace Windu, you were lucky to escape.
That was pawns.
Because Anakin is in no condition to jump back into the fight, and Windu's past with the boy will be a problem, Plo says that he will hunt them down. This mission would be an opportunity to depart much wisdom on little Ahsoka, and he warns her that they were going down into the more dangerous, lower levels of Coruscant.
We must go to the lower levels. The underworld.
Seeing no point in going to Boba's last known location, as that was the only place they could be sure he would not be. Instead, they would go into crime dens and try and gain intel or find an associate of Fett's. But to follow his lead this time.
This is the 5th scumbucket drinking hole we've been to.
And this time, try to be more subtle. You have adopted many of your master's ways, including a lack of subtlety.
And even explains how vices can be a Jedi's ally.
You may be surprised what people reveal when they have been drinking.
In the cantina, Plo makes it known to the bartender that he was a Jedi, while Ahsoka fades into the crowd and calms herself in the Force to eavesdrop in on the conversation swirling around her. Eventually, she hears a man talking of an associate on Florum that was killed by Aurra Sing. Before she learns more, they detect her, and a dozen weapons spring out of cloaks and holsters, only for the blue saber to ignite as Plo moved to her side, warning them not to try it. The Padawan tosses credits to distract the crowd, and they slip away. Plo just thought she couldn't contain herself again, but is so proud to hear what she picked up.
Well done, little Ahsoka. We're off to Flora.
Before the next rotation, a T-6 shuttle was making its descent into Hondo Ohnaka's pirate camp. With hushed voices, Hondo explains that he had nothing to do with this, and warns him of the trap.
They're waiting inside the bar. I have no idea what just planned for you.
As soon as Plo takes a seat, Boba rushes out of the shadows with his dad's Westar 34 in hand. Even with the blaster pressed to the back of his head, Plo is unshaken and talking to her like he was the one with power here.
We can do this the difficult way or the simple way. The choice is yours.
Aurra tried to stay tough, but Ahsoka leaps out and severs Sing's antenna and puts Saber to throat. The Jedi plead for a peaceful resolution, only for Aura to give a sign to the boy. He shoots at Ahsoka, giving her a chance to push the saber back and pull her pistols, while Plo had sensed the boot firing projectiles, slamming the table down to intercept before sending it into the path of the rapid blaster fire. In a blink, Plo's blade destroys her pistols and gets her to surrender. Never losing a second, he is asking for the location of the prisoners as he backs her up to the wall, but the young Fett deploys a small explosive, which was just large enough to force everyone to scramble. The boy tries to follow after her, but the Master easily force pulls him back, and he cried out to his adoptive mother. She callously turns away and saves herself. Again, Plo is immediately asking for help in saving the men.
If you do not tell us where those men are, they are going to die.
As a great father figure in the temple, he recognizes that in the underworld, Hondo could step into this role, citing his relationship with Jango to get through to the boy.
It is the honorable thing to do. It's what your father would have wanted.
Seconds later, he is able to contact Ahsoka with the coordinates, realizing that Singh was leading her in the opposite direction. Her speeder opens fire on Bossk, knocking him to the ground as she slices the hostages free. Admiral Killian holds the rifle on the Trandoshan, while Singh finally caught up with them, crashing into the speeder and making her way into Slave 1. Little Ahsoka proved as brave and tenacious as her master, leaping onto the craft and slicing off a wing before moving to the cockpit, forcing a crash landing, as the Padawan is hit with remorse and sadness, seeing the fiery explosion and believing that she had just taken a life. That's it for part 2. I'll see you in part 3, with the final years of the Clone Wars and Plo's life, seeing the most difficult time for the Jedi Order, as the dark side was having an influence on even the members of the High Council in a way like never before. Hit that like button, leave a comment, and share the video. These are all the best ways to help me out. Subscribe so you don't miss the series, but most important of all, remember, evil is an action, not a faction, and the Force will be with you, always.